Ray, from 30 plus years in NRCS, what did you learn?
Well, I tell you, I'll never forget. I had my aha moment when I was living in Idaho, and I was working as an Oregon NRCS employee, and I kept saying to myself, I think something's very wrong with modern agriculture. I said, here I live in this beautiful valley, the Treasure Valley. We had one of my farmer friends had 500 prime acres, and we had plenty of water, excellent soils, and he couldn't bring his son and daughter into the operation. It really bothered me. I said, how many acres do we really need to make a living? And the other thing that really bothered me is that every time irrigation season came, that beautiful Snake River would turn into chocolate. And I said, something's wrong with our current model. And it really bothered me. And I think I was going through a moment of crisis. And I thought maybe I had to go buy a Corvette or something. And I said, but I started asking very deep, probing questions. And I would ask my own coworkers, and nobody wanted to talk about it. But we were spending billions and trillions of dollars of money, and yet we weren't changing things. That really bothered me.
And I think that's what's happened. Us as producers, we came to accept a degraded resource. David, look at when you started, and now look at the resource you have today.
Yes, it's unbelievable how we've changed our soils and made them more regenerative and made them more responsible to do things without all the bought-in inputs that we were putting in back in the early 60s and 70s.
Yeah, and isn't that what it's about? We're building resilience into these ecosystems.
That's correct, yes.
I think one of the things that I walked away with 8 years of university study, I realized I was taught the wrong premise. See, when I left college, they told me, your job is yield. To control, force, manipulate, genetically splice it, change it. But not one teacher, not one professor, not one mentor told me, no, Ray, your job is to love it, nurture it, to build it, to understand how it works. I wasn't taught that. It would have just taken one person to give me the right premise, the right foundation of how to look at the natural system. It would have changed everything for me. It would have been a big deal for me.
And Alan, you've been on hundreds of farms and ranches all over North America. Why don't you talk a little bit about that change, the change people can make to their own operation?
Yeah, it's certainly been a journey for me, but having had the privilege of being on so many farms and ranches and watching people go through this transition, it's transformative in a number of ways. First of all, if we talk about the soil and the ecosystem, the life that you see on a farm or ranch, it just starts to explode. And farmers and ranchers inherently have that in their soul, that they truly do love life. Mm-hmm. And once they start to see life returning to their farms and ranches, it renews their spirit, it significantly improves their attitude and their whole quality of life. And so what we have observed is not just the transformation of their ability to be productive and profitable, but their ability to transform their minds and to totally change the way that they view things.
And the way that other people view things, their communities.
Yes.
And their quality of life changes.
Yeah.
I think we talk about, for many years, we talk about money, how to make a living. But what Alan says is beautiful, because as we teach this and as they apply these regenerative principles, many of the producers come to me and says, Ray, I love farming again.
Yes.
And it resonates with them. It's really cool to see that.
You know, one of the things I tell people is I used to wake up every day trying to decide what I was going to kill that day. Was it going to be a weed? Was it going to be a pest? Was it going to be a fungal disease? But I was going to kill something. Now I wake up every day, how do I enhance more life on my operation? Yeah. And it's much more enjoyable working with life than it is with death.
One thing, as an agronomist, I was never confident. And now I'm confident because I know what the goal is. The goal is to mimic life, mimic nature. Yeah. because it works, it's beautiful, it's elegant. Now I am confident because I can lead producers down this path. And the beautiful thing about this path, if they follow it, all of a sudden they're able to shed a lot of these tools they use, the chemistries and the things that are making them go broke.
And Ray, let's expand on that a little bit, because so often those of us who get out and present, we hear, oh, it won't work here. You don't understand, it's not going to work at my place. I don't know, it's too hot, it's too cold. Why don't we talk about that a little bit?
Well, one thing I tell people, because it was interesting when I went to school, I would look at my little farm and I said, okay, this is the farm that farm was taken out of a prairie. The prairie works totally different from the farm. That's what I was taught in the forest. But now I realize, no, that farm was taken out of that. It was hewn out of that. And so when I go talk to producers on a national and global scale, they actually separate that in their mind. But the processes, what happens in nature, like the water cycle, happens on the farm. And so what we've done is we've segregated in our minds. And it really has hurt the way we look at nature and how we look at the farm. It has caused a major problem. That's what I have seen.
So the one thing I've learned from that, Ray, in observing these transformations, is that no matter where we go in the world, soil is soil and biology is biology, right?
Absolutely. I tell them biology is powerful. In fact, I tell people you cannot have climate without soil and plant. It cannot happen.
Well, and you said it best, Ray. Plant and soil are one. Mm-hmm. They're one. David, why don't you explain a little bit? You know, I've had the good fortune of being on your operation several of times, and we've looked at your soils and then neighboring soils, and the difference is just amazing.
What we see, you know, it is, and it's really, you know, I guess I have to say my point of call was being a grain farmer that I wanted to keep the soil where it belonged. You know, I didn't, and, you know, every day when it would rain, we'd have muddy streams or chocolate streams, and I just got so, you know, I thought that was things leaving the soil. Mm-hmm. So then we began working with cover crops, and of course I love cover crops because it's green in the fall when everything is brown. It makes you feel good. And then we saw that we went from 5 to 10 ton of soil loss down to 200 pounds per acre, you know, and now we're down to 0. Mm-hmm. And with no soil loss, that means we're able to keep our nutrients where it belongs. Yeah. We're able to have better water infiltration. When I look at fields, going to different locations, and I see fields that's 80% covered with water, and they still got corn fodder in them. You know, they have infiltration problems, and we need to correct our infiltration problems so we don't have runoff problems. Yeah. And by utilizing cover crops and regenerative agriculture, I think these things can come along and work real well together.
And water is becoming a bigger and bigger issue all over the world. But let's face it, people, they don't have a rainfall, a moisture problem. Right. They have an effective rainfall. They have an infiltration problem. Isn't that right, Ray?
Absolutely. We deal with the symptoms. And I was talking to a group in Illinois, and we were talking and said, look, folks, we do not have a runoff problem. We have an infiltration problem. And most producers want to address their problems with tillage, something physical, something chemical. And I said, you do not approach nature from a chemical, physical perspective. You have to approach her ecological, biological. She's biological. And saying that, the most powerful thing that we can put in our soils is a living cover, a living root. They change it, they modify it, in synchrony with the biology. Once they understand the power of life, that's what we do. This is what we teach, is about the power of life. Mm-hmm. It transforms.
Yeah. So we're really not pushing change. We're trying to get understanding, right? Because only through understanding can change occur. Right.
And as a grain farmer, as we understand how we use cover crops, they become our tools for tillage because they have the root growth and the dynamics of what roots can do for us to release nutrients in the soil and those kind of things.
Alan, I just wanted to ask one. So often we hear people, oh, I'd love to go down the regenerative path, but I just can't afford to make that transition. Could you address that a little bit, the transition from a conventional type model to a regenerative model?
Absolutely. You know, the beautiful thing about this is that there's not this huge cost that people perceive. All you're doing is simply reorienting and changing your practices, and the reason people think that there's this potential big cost for this transition is because they don't understand biology and the incredible power of biology. What they're doing is they're still thinking mechanically and chemically, and I've got to add something in that vein for this to occur. But biology can shift very rapidly, and all of us have seen that. And when you effect that, then the cost of transition actually are very minimal. And most of the time, what we all have seen on these farms and ranches is that the transition costs in year one are minimal. In year two, often they are reducing input costs so significantly that their net margins by year two have already increased substantially over what they were prior to making the transition.
Right. So we're really looking for is a change in mindset.
A change in
You know, compaction between the ears, so to speak. I'll never forget in 1997, I heard Don Campbell present, and he told me this. He said, if you want to make small changes, change the way you do things. But if you want to make major changes, change the way you see things. And I think that's what regenerative ag is. It's the power of observation and the power and the ability to be able to go in and look at things from a different perspective, from nature's perspective.
Well, it's like, so I have a good friend of mine down in Oklahoma, Sam Bass. Y'all know Sam. And Sam gave me this statement a few months ago that I just absolutely love. And he starts with a question. And the question is, what if I could tell you something as a farmer and rancher that would totally change the way you farm and ranch? And then he has a pregnant pause and he says, there is a God and you are not him.
Yeah,
That's well put.
Yes,
Leave it to Sam. That's well put.
yes, sir. Yeah.
It kind of reminded me while I was working with an organic farmer, and it was in Kentucky, and you and I were at that workshop, and I don't know if you remember that, and one of the organic farmers says, Ray, you don't know, I do all these supplements, I put all these minerals, and I get everything in the bottle, and I follow this, I try to balance all the nutrients, and I said, and I'm kind of listening, kind of getting disinterested, and I'm eating my barbecue sandwich, and I said, I look at him very soberly, and I said, how does it feel to play God? He says, well, Ray, what do you mean? I said, you know, that beautiful, elegant organisms, they make all those nutrients available. Yes. They do that. And besides, you're not good at it. By the way, how's that working out for you? Yeah. And he says to me, and he puts his head down, and he goes, well, it's very expensive. I said, the whole system was designed for you, to help you, and to work for you, and to make all those nutrients available. All you got to do is feed it and create that habitat. And so I think he kind of walked away and he never thought of it from that perspective. Mm-hmm. And how powerful, like Alan was talking about, how powerful the biology is.
Well, and I think one of the issues, you know, as farmers and ranchers today, we're getting it pounded into us every day. You have to use this synthetic. You need this bug in a jug. You need these amendments. That's the only way you're going to make a living. Well, what's left at the end? And the beauty of what we're doing is we're able to take more of the money that we generate, keep it in our pocket while regenerating those resources.
So let me ask this question. So Gabe and Dave, both of you have been longtime row crop farmers. Yes. So if we look at yield increases since, say, 1900, from 1900 to now, so about 120 years now, right? Mm-hmm. What have yields in all of our major row crops done over the last 120 years?
Yeah.
How much have they increased?
Well, on an individual acre basis, they have increased significantly.
Yeah, so it's been literally an exponential increase, mm-hmm. right, in yield since 1900, whether we're talking about corn, soybeans, wheat, mm-hmm. cotton, whatever. Mm-hmm. Okay,
but it's
So-
also degraded our soils.
Okay, so that leads to my next question then. If since in the last 120 years we have exponentially increased our row crop yields, how much have we increased our net profitability per acre on our farms over the last 120
We
years?
have not.
Have not.
So instead, what has happened over the last 120 years?
We've degraded our resources. It's,
And profitability for farmers has done what?
yeah,
Went down.
significant.
Yes.
We have created a system where we have tenant farmers working for tools. See, I've always said is that where has the wealth of rural America gone? All of us drive. A lot of us put thousands of miles. We fly. We go through this country. What do we see in the rural America? We see a drying up of rural America. What I see is once these beautiful, vibrant agriculture communities have desiccated. So the blessings and the wealth of the land used to flow through the farmer and the rancher, and it would support the local coffee shop or the gas station and the shoe shop. Now the wealth has gone to corporate America. The money has flown to the equipment, to John Deere, to the chemicals, to the tools. The wealth has gone to corporate America. It has not stayed in the community. And I think what I love about this regenerative message, the wealth goes back to the community.
Yeah. Look, we get, as farmers and ranchers, get it pounded into us. We got to increase yield because we got to feed the world, right? Well, in 2017, there's approximately 7.2 billion people on this planet. How much food did we produce? Enough to feed 10.2 billion people approximately.
Yeah.
We've been sold this bill of goods that we have to increase yield, we have to increase pounds. We're already producing enough. That's not the issue.
One thing that I really hate is when a politician goes up in front of a large group of farmers, you're feeding the world. That's what they say, they're feeding the world. But the reality is 70% of all food comes from acreage 1 to 5 acres. I'm an ex-Peace Corps volunteer. I will tell you our industrial model is actually causing more poverty. Because what happens is when all that corn and soybean goes into the market, these poor farmers in Guatemala, they can't compete. And they cannot sell their corn and compete. So this model is actually creating more hunger and more poverty. But yet, when the politician stands up in front of the group and says, you are feeding the world. What it really does, it tells the producer, you're doing a good job continuing to be a tenant farmer. And I hate that message. And I think that permeates everywhere because they tell us the regenerative ag model that we're promoting, we cannot feed the world with that type of model. And I say, that is absolutely wrong.
Well, I think you're right, Ray, because as we have went down this road of regenerative ag and use of cover crop and not losing the soil, we've been noticing that our livestock and crops are more healthy. We see that our corn and beans and wheat and those crops have more protein in them, more digestibility for the livestock, and the livestock stays healthier. So we don't need to have as much veterinary problems as the people do where they are confined just in these bigger feedlots and things like that.
If you take a look at our common health problems, not just in the U.S., but in any developed country in the world, we see very similar issues. And in spite of the fact that in these developed countries, people actually have plenty to eat, it's what they're eating, what they're putting in their mouths and in their bodies on a daily basis. And so, the data is very conclusive. Nutrient density in our foods has declined significantly over the past 4 to 5 decades. And it is absolutely tied back to the degradation of our soils and the lack of biology. Because biology is what creates the mineral cycling in the soil that is necessary to create that nutrient density. So the medical community is now starting to finally recognize this and pick up on this. So we do have people in the medical community, such as Dr. Zach Bush and many others, that are now recognizing this. They're working with their patients on this, and they are actively involved in trying to link together food with the way it's produced. So now these folks in the medical community are working with people like us.
Yeah, yeah. And then a large part of that plays in is the consumer. Because let's face it, consumers are partially to blame for this current production model also, because they have demanded cheap, low-cost food and food that lacks nutrient density. So farmers and ranchers aren't to take the blame for all of this.
No.
Part of it, but part of it is the consumers, part of it's the medical community. Now let's bring everyone together, and through regenerative ag, let's move everyone forward.
Which, by the way, cheap food is an absolute fallacy. And many consumers don't realize and understand that, because, what is one of the largest tranches of our federal funding each year? What does it go to? The Farm Bill.
Yep.
And so we have created this house of cards where the consumer is paying a huge amount of taxes in to support federal farm subsidies and these types of things, so that we can have the facade of having cheap food.